for 8 good years in here. And of course, my cousin, who I didn't know would log in until I saw her name, and I was like, which questions does she have that she can't ask directly? And anyway, she actually did have one. So to me, I'm Rachael Okong. I, like most of us, we grew up in Kenya. I went to school there. After high school, I came to Germany to study, basically, joined the Studienkolleg. I would like to make people who are listening know that I started with the T course, but I initially wanted to do the M course. But because I wanted to bridge the time and I wanted to perfect my German for the next Aufnahmeprüfung, I decided to do the T course, which actually helped me perfect my German skills. So when I did my M course, it was not a matter of will I pass, it was a matter of I'm passing, but will they give me the vacancy? And then I went into M course, finished it, did pharmacy. When I was doing my formulatur, I realized this is not really what I want to do. This is actually the degree my parents wanted me to do, not me. So I went back and studied biology, something that I really liked doing because I just like working with nature. Children are like plants. That's how I look at them. Went, did that, specialized in evolution and biodiversity, worked a few years at the Freie University and had collaborations all over. And because of not understanding why young ladies, I have this drive for young women. Young ladies would parse very well. They'd have like very good marks when they join the university. Like to go study biology, you need a 1 or up to a 1.7. So that's like in the Kenyan system, it's an A minus. But you get an A minus and you come to the university and you fail something as simple as mathematics. And the question would be, why are they failing? Why are we having graduates dropping out? I wasn't in the math department, but we, of course, when we held our meetings, we would see the student dropout that we had. So I got interested in finding out where does the problem come from, and read around and found out that young girls at the age between the age of 9 and between the age of 9 and the age of 11, a young girl decides in her does not know, she doesn't actively decides, but her brain decides I like mathematics or I'll turn off mathematics. That is just, first of all, the growth development bit of the child. And of course, there's the teacher aspect. So because of that, I decided, okay, let me go back to school and find out how to change this, find out what's the root cause of the problem and how to change it. And it's a very big, complex thing, mainly because like in Germany, most teachers are women at primary school level, and yet most math teachers are men. And there's a way young female brains just don't accept mathematics being taught by a man. So that is how I landed up at the primary school. And then I still continued with my university work, but now I'm more passionate about mentoring future teachers, teaching future teachers what they should be and how they should look at the child they're supposed to teach. So Njoki, thank you for getting me to share this. I know you've been on my neck for a long time. So here I am. I hope I'll be able to answer all your questions. Like Jacinta and Irene Bibi said earlier on, this is a very complex topic. I'm not sure we'll be able to run it all in one day, but I'll try to cover as much as I can. So we'll start with the German education system. And I'll start by introducing to you what we're going to do. I've divided this talk into 6 different things. Next folio, I'll introduce the German education system and then get into the role schools play in our children's lives. And by the way, when we're talking about the German school system, we'll talk about the system. And when I talk about our children's lives, today I'm talking about Kenyan children or children of African descent only. I'm not really going to include the German children in here because that's another topic altogether. And then we look at the role of the child, because the child also has an active role they play within the education, the role of the parent. And then something that was so important today was the conflicts, because as migrant parents, we usually have so many conflicts. We either feel overwhelmed with them or we feel like we're not taken seriously enough. And then we can get to the discussion point where Jerry said you can come ask all sorts of questions you want to ask, and I hope I'll be able to help you with answers. Yeah. So now, the next folio, bitte. So in the introduction, I'll take you through a few things. First of all, like we said, education is a public good in Germany. Like every child has the right to education. And it's only not just Germany. The UN Convention decided that all kids have a right to education. Whether our governments honor this or don't honor this, it doesn't matter. As long as they belong to the UN, it's one of the basic children human rights. There are 10 children human rights, and one of them is the right to the education. So while we are in Germany, we can say, yes, it is a public good. I have a right to it. And yet, not everyone has access to equal education. That's something we're going to talk about later. You can also ask questions about that, because the government pays for the schools. Like teachers are on a government payroll. School books are bought mostly by the government up to a certain state, also depending on which state you live in. Schools are funded by the governments. We get our budgets for the year or for the academic year. Like right now, the academic year is ending. So we get budgets for the academic year that needs to cater for the children and also to cater for substitute teachers. But we also get budgets for the calendar year. Those are two confusing things. But it's all meant to be poured down on the child. So who funds this? The government. It's you. That's why you as a parent, if you're paying taxes, it doesn't matter what kind of work you're doing. As long as you're paying your taxes, you have a right to be interested in your child's education. And it is your responsibility to make sure that the children are getting the correct school support they need to be getting. So we have two types of schools. We have the public schools, depending on the cities where you live in. I live in Berlin, so we have public schools, which is what most people in Germany know. And then we do have private schools. So in big cities like Berlin, Frankfurt, Munich, Hamburg, and whichever other places, depending on whichever states they are, you'll find we have private schools. And these private schools, they are funded, a percentage of them, mostly up to 93%, is funded by the government, but the rest is funded by the parents. So in the private schools, parents pay for their education. So they're not only paying their taxes to pay for the school system, but they're actually getting extra money out of their pockets after paying their taxes to make sure their kids get the kind of education they need. And this is, the private school system is more or less what we Kenyans are used to. We're used to paying, the child goes to school, the teachers do what they're supposed to do, and you see the results. While in the government school system here in Germany, you don't actively pay. Your child goes to school, it learns what it's supposed to learn, and comes back home at the end of 18 years or at the end of 9 years earliest, your child is equipped to do something. So the private schools are classified according to what parents would like to do. So there are religious schools, like the Christian schools. We've got Muslim schools, Muslim-based education system. We've got Europe schools that basically teach the native language, which is German, and a partner language, which might be French, Italian, Greek, Turkish, or whatever else the child might be interested in. So based on where one lives, and based on what one would like to do. And this is where most Kenyan parents now land. I'm from Kenya. My child doesn't speak German. What school do I throw my child into? The international school is always the first option we all have. Now it's a matter of, can my pocket fund the international school? Yes or not? And then, of course, we make these decisions based on where we are at that moment, and then other problems arise much later. May I see the next folio? So the school system here is quite simple, but it can be overwhelming if one does not know. So the primary school is basically 4 years. A child, after kindergarten, the child joins a primary school for 4 years. If you're in a state like Berlin, I live in Berlin, for those who don't know, I live in Berlin, so we are the Ausnahme, we are the strange people. We decided to let our kids stay in primary school for 6 years to give them 2 more years to play and 2 more years for the brain to develop. So yes, we do send some kids to high school after grade 4, but most of them are actually joining high school after grade 6. So primary school is 4 years. And then based on your child's performance in primary school, and based on the teacher's perception of what they think your child could achieve in future, and based on the teacher's perception of who you, the parent, are, They will decide whether your child will join a Hauptschule. The Hauptschule is now the school where they'll just do 5 more years of high school, so a total of 9 years in school, and then they'll go do an apprenticeship training like being a baker or being a mason or something like that. And then if we say, and that usually goes to the children who are very weak in class. So I would say that a child who has a D, like if I have a child who's constantly having D's, the Kenyan way, D's, E's, then I would say, hey, you sending you to a different kind of school is punishing you. Let me send you to the Hauptschule just to push you through school, and then you go and learn a trade and you can get to work. That's the first one. And then the next level, which is a little bit higher, is the Realschule, where the child will stay for 6 years. So that's 1 more year. And after these 6 years, the child has something called the Realabschluss or Mittlere Reife. In Berlin, we call it Mittlere Reife. And with this, the child can now go do stuff like nursing, certain courses. They're still not university courses, but they are apprenticeship courses, but a little bit higher, also with a little bit higher pay. And this is where most children actually usually land. So when you come from Kenya, or if you're in Kenya and you want your child to come to Germany for their studies, and they did their KCSE and got an average of C+ and above, this is actually what Germany says our certificate is equivalent to. So the KCSE certificate of a C+ and above is equivalent to a Realschulabschluss. That is 6 years of high school. So those make 10 years of being in school. That's equivalent of year 10 here. So now I, as a primary school teacher, will think, there's this kid in my class who's very good. They learn very quickly. They finish their assignments in time. They think broader than whatever is being taught at that time. I will, when I'm asked, which school do you see this child in? I will usually say, send them to a gymnasium. That's a grammar school. A child who goes to a gymnasium is basically a university candidate. It's unfortunate that we decide this very early when the kids are so young. That's one unfortunate thing about the German education system, because some kids wake up much later, and yet it's decided very early whether your child is going to be a university graduate in the future, or they might do something like nursing, or no, I don't think your child will do anything like that. I think your child, the best they can do is ever be someone who helps out in a bakery, not even the baker, but just mtu wa mkono. So, and then despite these 3 other schools, there's an interesting school system called the Gesamtschule. The Gesamtschule, in a state like Berlin, we call them the Integrierte Sekundarschule, and we got rid of the word Gesamtschule because it sounds horrible. So in the Gesamtschule, it's where after a child has left primary school, they join a school where they can achieve all the 3 school types above. So if the child decides after year 9, I'm done, it's okay. They just leave. If they decide, no, I'm moving on 1 more year, they'll continue. If they say, I want to go up to my Abitur and do my gymnasium because I want to study, they will be allowed to, but the Gesamtschule allows them 1 more year that the gymnasium does not give them. So they can stay in school up to year 13 instead of year 12. There's a very big advantage to this. We usually tell parents, and I as a parent, actually preferred this for one of my own children. Because if you have a child and you know they're good at school, but they need to be pushed. They're learners who sit and learn by themselves, and they're learners who are pushed. Then the Gesamtschule is always somewhere where your child will actually learn without a lot of psychological or emotional pressure, either from the parents or from school. So that's the basic German education system in a nutshell. So what's the role of the school? The next folio. When you send your children to school, I as a teacher have only one responsibility. It's to teach and help raise them. In German, we have zwei Aufträge, Lehrauftrag und Erziehungsauftrag. So I'm paid to teach your child, but I'm also paid to help you raise your child. Of course, as I raise your child, I'm raising them according to my values and according to the values of that class. So teaching, that's just passing knowledge, but as they teach, they're not learning only book knowledge. They're learning a lot of social skills. I'll look at a child, how can I help them learn certain things? What are they good at? What do they excel in? What is difficult for them? What kind of a learner are they? How do I push this learner for this learner to attain the best they can attain in their school life while they're still under me? And then, of course, helping you raise the children is, we need to instill values in these children. So we, the teachers, we instill values in your child. We have children who come to school, especially the ones who've changed from a different school, and they've never had to learn certain things like how to sit still or how to let someone speak and finish before it's their turn to speak. So we teach them social skills. We evaluate their needs. Do they need social psychological help? Do they need help with their motor skills? Like, do they need therapies? You'll have a child, let's say I've had a child who came from Syria, and this child was not able to hold a pencil because he did not know how to hold a pencil. Where would he have learned it? So it's my job when I have this child in class to first of all learn, how do I teach him to hold this pencil? I don't expect it to happen in a day. And sometimes I'll always also have to get external help. I'll have to advise the parents, go to this and this place, look for this and this doctors, get help here and there. If the child has speech problems, and this is very interesting for us Kenyans, because our children have problems with different sounds, depending on what languages they learn at home, depending on what first language they learned at home. So in this, I can also separate the children who are born in Germany and they've grown up with German as a language their brains absorb every day, and the children who come much later, whose brains have to absorb this language later. You sometimes find that there are sounds they fight to deal with. So we take them to speech. We advise parents to take their children to speech therapy. I, as a parent, know there's a time I just refused when my son's teacher told me, your son cannot speak certain sounds. And I was like, no, he doesn't need to. Until really we sat home and we were thinking, I was like, he just has an SH problem. But wait a minute, everyone in my hometown has SH problems. So why should he speak any different sound? But these are things that we look out for, because this SH problem, in as much as it was not a problem to me, the mother, it's a problem to my son, because if they're going to write sounds that have SCH, the Germans say sh, and he writes SH because that's what he had, he'll have a lot of grammatical mistakes in his work, which ultimately reduces his grade. It's not that he did not know what he's supposed to do. It's just that his ears did not hear correctly, because the ears were never trained to hear those sounds. So these are issues we face, where we often tell parents, go and get this help. And the parents sometimes will not understand. They'll be like, but my child speaks German. And yes, your child speaks German, but there are sounds your child does not understand, or the brain does not absorb yet. Next folie. So what's the role of your child? Dear Kenyan parents, do you know your child is actually obliged by the government to attend school? Very many people do not know this, that your child must go to school. That kindergeld you pocket every end of the month. You pocket that kindergeld because your child is also waking up to go to school. So when your child decides, or when we decide, we've overslept, we can stay home, but this doesn't really happen in Kenyan families that much, but I've seen it happen in migrant families. The child overslept, or the child was sick and we didn't call school and inform them that the child was sick in good time. The school is actually obliged to call the police. If they call you and they do not find you and you do not say where your child is, they can call the police and the police will come home and find your child. Of course, this is not a big issue when children are at the primary school level, but once they get into teenagehood, where truancy becomes interesting because everyone else is doing it and teacher XY is boring, then you might have to pay fines because your child isn't going to school. Recently, I had to do with a parent whose daughter just decided she'll not be going to school anymore. And Mama was busy at work. So at some point she calls me and tells me, what do I do with this child? And it's not a Kenyan child, it's a Polish child. And I say, you have to get her to school one way or the other, pull her out of bed, because if you don't, you'll pay the fine. So eventually she got a 1,000 euro fine because her child was sleeping. She just didn't wake up to go to school. Mama was already at work. So this is something, we take it lightly, but it can be very expensive on our side. And besides, it's put on your child's file. So if your child is ever caught on the wrong side of the law because they had the wrong friendships and did not take part, or maybe they did something stupid, this is something the police will pull back out of their file, and they'll go back and say, this kid, even already back then, it had already started exhibiting these things. And that was not the child's problem. That was your problem as a parent. So it's you to remind your child of their role, that they need to do, one, attend school, and then two, children go to school to learn. So when they come to us to learn, we give them different assignments to do. These assignments are meant to be done at home most of the time. And when they're meant to be done at home, when the child comes back to school and they did not do it, it's just something I keep on noting every day. You didn't do your homework, you didn't do your homework, you didn't do your homework. And what parents forget, or most parents do not know, is that the German school system, unlike the Kenyan school system, the grading is 50 to 60% of the child's participation. So the written exam is only 40%, at most 50. Even in high school, it's 50. So when you say, I'll revise with my child and my child will get their ones, their twos, that's A, B. If your child was never doing their assignments, they get E's. And then we take the average. So you have African parents wondering, why is my child misperforming? Why are people thinking my child is weak? Your child is not weak. Your child is only not doing what it's supposed to do at school, which is constantly keeping their assignments up to date, constantly making sure their school bags are full. They have everything. They didn't forget anything at home. The pencils are there, everything they need. Another thing is your child's behavior. I do not know if you've really taken note of the report forms your children get. In Germany, we have two kinds of report forms. We have the grades, and then we have the behavior report form. So in the behavior, we write what kind of a person this child is. Does this child participate in class? Does this child help? Is this child obedient? Is this child polite? Is this child always fighting? Is this child helpful? And we, of course, we cross, yes, like 75 to 100%, 50 to 74%. And you'll find there'll be kids who are very social. And yet on the social behavior, it will look like they're very negative because they're just either quiet or they're always caught on the wrong side of the school day. So that's one thing the children know. When they go to school, every class has school rules, there are class rules, and they have to be kept. And it's your job also to remind them that they need to keep these ones. And then the most important thing that I as a teacher have issues with is that the child is the link between the school and the parents, but I have issues with the parents because the children get the information every day. If they're young, they need their parents to remind them and ask, was there anything from school today? Do you have a letter for me? Because we are not yet all digital, so we are not yet all sending emails. And we start sending emails much later, mostly to teach the children how to pass information from A to B. Mama, my teacher said I need this. You need to buy it by this date. On this and this day, we have a school trip. You need to send this and this amount of money by this and that date. So those are things where the child is slowly learning to be responsible for things that are of more interest to them than you. And they have to learn to do this always. So you'll find there are children who don't do this. And then on the last day, they're there and they're like, hey, I don't have the money. Or you'll find out the teacher being constantly picking up on this child, knowingly or unknowingly, because we are all human beings, because this child never has those things. And the child has to be trained to remember. But the training of the child goes both ways. It's both school and both home. A lot of the child's training is at home, in as much as we say the children in Germany spend more time at school, unless they're going to half-day school and they're not in the hot. and spend time with their parents. They're lucky that their parents have the time, but most of the time, your child spends 8 hours of their waking day at school. That is more time with the school than with you as a parent. So in this time, they have to learn to be the people who will say, today, this and that happened at school, I need help. Today, this and this happened to the other person. And you as a parent, stay up to date about what's happening in your child's life. But on the other hand, besides this being the role of the child, you as the parent have to train your child into this role. It's not something they do automatically, and it's not something I will do as a teacher. I don't have the time to train 25 times 7 children the same manners all the time. Next step. So we get to what's your role as a parent. 1, love your children. That's the first one I'll say. Love your children. Pour so much love on them. African children or Black children face a lot of subtle race issues at school. That the first thing I'll say, and I tell everyone, is love on your children as much as you can. Trust them and believe them when they tell you something went wrong at school. Those words, I've not put them in here, but trust them when they come and tell you this and that happened at school. Believe them. Believe them and then fight for them. But now we get to give them the basic needs. Are they clean? You wouldn't believe it, but we have kids with smelling teeth at school. Do they shower? Africans say we shower. And yet you'll find children saying, I'm not sitting next to so-and-so. I had this in my class 2 years ago. 2 years ago, a few people didn't want to sit next to a 12-year-old because she was smelling. And she was from Africa, from an African country. And it took them a while to come and tell me because they thought I'd primed my class to see race everywhere. So it took them a while to trust me to come and tell me that. And when they told me, I really had to discreetly spend time around this child. And yes, she wasn't having the best smell. So it's your job as parents, especially when your children are going through adolescent and the hormones are changing and things are changing. Watch out for their hygiene. And then give them the school materials they need. Don't let your child come to school with shoes that don't fit, shoes that are too old, clothes that are torn, clothes that are dirty. It's even strange that we are talking about that here, but it's really what we see every day. And give them food, the packed lunch boxes. Give healthy lunch boxes. Don't put sweets in there. Don't put pizza in there. Give them healthy food. Make sure there are fruits in there. You don't know how many lunch boxes I look at every day and I'm like, hey God, so you do something here. Like you end up praying for the children because other children are also looking at them and they'll go home and tell their parents, and then parents gossip, and it will end up coming back to your child when children are talking, meine Mama hat gesagt, and my mama said, and my mama said. So it ends up, it's your responsibility as the parent, but it's your child who suffers for what you've not done. Make sure they always have school material needed. Buy the exercise books before the others are full. Make sure there are extra pencils at home. I'll not ask you to buy a second pencil case, but make sure they have enough material. Check into their school bags every day. Is there a post for you? Is there something that was sent to you that you need to check out? Are there emails you need to respond to? Have you been called to school meetings? And are you yourself attending those parents' meetings? Are you aware about what's happening? Look for the teachers. It is you to be proactive, to look for your child's teachers. Find out, how is your child behaving in school? I always tell people your child's behavior at home is very different from your child's behavior at school. And what your child tells you about school is sometimes also very different from what your child tells us at school about you. So, and this is where I go, like, be friends with your child so you get the same version all the time. But more so, be friends with the school teachers. Not like befriend them, but get to know them. Right? Is there anything that my child needs? Are they coping? there are always this Elternsprechtag, those open days, that's what they're called. They used to call them in my school back then. Open days or parents' days where you're allowed to go to school and ask information. Attend them. Don't say my child is bright, I don't need to. If your child is bright and constantly getting A's, please send the teacher an email and say, I'm so-and-so's parents. I know my child doesn't need academic help, but is there anything I need to do on their social skills? Are they still okay? Because your child might be getting A's, but socially they're dying inside. And we Kenyan parents tend to look more at the grades rather than the child overall. So especially for those ones with teenagers, I would advise you to make sure you sit at least once a day with your children and have a meal. Because many children are very lonely out here in Germany. They're so busy with their phones and they're so busy with their friends. And if all you're doing is grabbing food wherever you can, you'll not have time to sit and find out what's really happening in your child's life. And it's during this puberty stage that we lose those children. We have enough Kenyan teenagers in prison. There's so many in this country in prison. And most of the time my heart breaks because I think it's only because one parent somewhere did not find out how their child was doing. Of course, we have other cases, but most of the time, I think it's just emotional neglect that leads to this. And then teach your child values. Teach your child your values. Especially if your children are attending state schools, teach them a lot of values because they're going to hear a lot of things. Make sure they're kind people. And besides that, teach them how to be strong in the face of racism. They're going to hear stupid sentences like, I'll not play with you because you're brown. Or look at your ugly hair if it's a girl. Teach them to love themselves. That's why I started with love your children. Teach them to love themselves so much that even when someone says something like that, they go like, na und. Okay, for those who don't understand German, is that, so what? I'm brown, so what? It's my color. Let them be proud. Teach them to be proud of themselves. And in this, I'm also going to ask you to buy them literature that has people of their skin color. We have all of us, and even I in my younger parenting years, my firstborn son is 23. So he grew up with German literature. I mean, there were no English books in Germany back then anyway. So he grew up knowing the white Ariels and white Barbies and whatever else you call them, because there was nothing else. But in today's generation, we have access to so many books that have people of color in good positions. Make sure your children read such books, that they know there are also people like me doing things out there. Introduce your children. I think the people in here are people who are interested, and most have some level of education, but introduce your children to African lawyers, introduce them to African doctors, introduce them, take your child to the museum. If it's a Saturday, pay 20 euros, take your child to the museum, because on Monday when your child comes to school, the first thing I'll ask them was, how was your weekend? I mean, that's how I start all my Monday classes, and that's how all my colleagues countrywide start. How was your weekend? What did you do? One thing, I'm trying to find out, what did they really do, because I'm interested. Two, as I find out this, I'm finding out what kind of people are you. I'm also finding out what problems were there in your family. Like, I get to hear so much out of how was your weekend. I get to hear so much of what a child will be later. Like at the end of grade 4, when we're deciding, are we sending your child to a gymnasium or to a Hauptschule? During the meetings, we'll hear statements like, yeah, I think Imani will go to the gymnasium because the mother is a teacher, or because the father is a doctor, or because the parents are always doing so many things with them, so we are sure they'll be able to support later. And then you'll hear, Kamau, sorry for taking your name, Kamau will send Kamau to the Hauptschule because he always says the parents never have time. I've never seen them in school. So the boy is bright, but nobody will help him. So let's just send him to the Hauptschule. And that is how we mess up our children's lives. So get involved everywhere. If your school has Parents' Day, parents volunteers are needed, go. There are school trips, volunteers are needed, volunteer. Take a day off work, tell your boss my child is going on a school trip. All bosses understand that. At least once a year is normal. Do things. volunteer for library sessions, volunteer to read. If parents are needed to show up at work and speak about their workplaces, or even if your child has a topic like careers, tell your child, go and say, Papa can come. Your child will proudly go and say, my Papa can come. I'm currently tuitioning a boy for his A-levels, and he's a Kenyan boy, and he had to write a composition about they're talking about race issues, and he had to talk about who his role model is. And his teacher was not pleasantly surprised when he stood up and said, my role model is my mother. And of course, this is how we also shattered these racist ideologies in people's brains. And he was asked, why? And he said, well, one, my mother is a lawyer, so I would like to be a lawyer like her. Oh, she's a Kenyan. Yes, she's a Kenyan. And where does she work? And he ended up saying where his mother works, and it's a place with a very big name. But why is she your role model? And he went ahead to say how his mother is kind, and in the face of racial injustices, that she still always finds a very amicable way of dealing with things, and she's still very helpful to other people. Let your children know they can learn from you, and they can learn from people around you. Because that which we give them from home is which will strengthen them for school. That which will give them from home is what will change the perception of the teachers' minds and of the parents' minds and of the classmate minds about who we are and about who your child is, because this is about your child by the end of the day. I'm saying this from experience because my son, if I look at my son, his schooling in primary and high, and I compare to my daughter, who's around 7 years younger than him, she has had a better parent. He did, because I was informed. When I had him, I had zero information. But with her, now I had a voice, I found information. I was active in all the places I needed to be active. She's the kind of child where the teachers did not have to think, will someone help her for her gymnasium? They were like, okay, that's what the mom will. That's what the information is there. Well, the other one, when he said he wants to bring his mom to school to speak about her career, he was told, but your mom is a cleaner. And he said, no, my mom is a student, but she cleans. But now you see the way a teacher's perception can actually, she did not say it to him in private, she said to him in class. So she not only affected his thinking, she affected everyone else's perception of him. And this younger one, everyone else's perception of her is very different because of how her teachers have viewed her from the word go. And this is why we are holding these meetings, to make sure that our children do not have to go through what our older children went through in this country 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. The next. So you can actually move to the next one also. The big topic why we are meeting today is conflicts. African parents are of the opinion Germans don't understand us. German teachers are of the opinion foreigners don't understand them. School children are of the opinion nobody understands me anyway. My school does not understand me, my parents don't understand me. So we'll start, first of all, there are conflicts faced at school, children fighting, it's normal. When children fight, they can sort it out at school, but sometimes it becomes too much that the children have to involve their parents. So one thing I always advise people is look for the other parent to clear these issues out. If this is not able to be sorted by the school, and by the school I mean most schools have, almost all schools have social workers, actually not most. We are obliged to have social workers. So the social workers, if we can't sort the issue in class, we will send the children to social workers to help them sort these issues amongst themselves. If we do not, the children always involve their parents. The parents might come to school to help their kids sort issues. I hardly see or hear of African parents coming to sort issues. By the time an African parent comes to school, they're coming to fight. So usually they'll involve the other parent. The other parent may or may not understand the African parent. If you're lucky, things will end up quickly. If you're unlucky, things can go the bad way. So how do I do it? First of all, that's the child. I'll move to the child teacher, because how to solve these problems is all one thing. Sometimes a child has a feeling the teacher is picking up on them. I usually say, I'm talking as a mother here, not as a teacher. Trust your child. The teacher in me wants to say something else. The teacher in me wants to say, it's not that. It's not that. But I always say we are all human beings, and children sometimes can trigger something in us that we're not aware about. And it takes a while for me as the grown-up, and it takes self-reflection time to realize, no, this child actually triggers something in me. It's not that the child is bad, it's just that there's something whatever in me. So the child-teacher conflicts can start with a simple thing like grades. I did my test, this is right, why have you said it's wrong? And then, of course, the teacher feeling, who are you to correct me? I mean, we also have that here. I may check and say, yeah, you're right, and then give you a point. Or I may look and say, no, it stays that way. And then there's this wonderful thing of the child saying, but for whoever you are, the other child has the same point. They wrote the same thing, but you gave them a mark and you did not give me. And really, there are studies, there's lots of studies that have been done that show that teachers, without being teachers were given the same work, the same exam with two different names. Like the answer was the same. Let's say the answer was I'm a girl. So they were given two sheets with I'm a girl. And one was called Murad. I'm now just taking a Turkish name because it was an Arab name. One had an Arab name and one had a German name. And the one that they had the German name was correct, and the one that had the foreigner name was wrong. And that is just something wired in the brain, that we are always fairer to that which is closer to us. So when your child brings the results, when your child tells you, but mama, the other child got this, do me a favor, go fight for your child. This is the mother speaking, the mother in me speaking, but this is also the African teacher in me speaking. Go fight for your child, because there are studies that actually show that teachers react differently to different names. In my case, when I hear there's Anjeri who has applied to come to my class, I just smile. I mean, it just makes me happy. And if I'm told there's a Sebastian that's coming to me, it's Sebastian, so it's normal. So this is the same that happens. So such conflicts come with the marking, or a child feeling the other child does the same thing and they're not punished, but if I do the same thing, I'm punished. If so-and-so is caught doing this, it's kind of okay, it's looked over, but if I'm caught doing the same thing, it's not the same. It's us, the parents, to step in and fight for the children. So it's you to look for conversation with the teacher. If it doesn't work with the teacher, look for the school social worker. If it does not work, go a level higher. Go to the school head. And this is where I tell parents, if that does not work, go to the Ministry of Education. Look for your Schulrat. Because once in a while, not always, but once in a while, you will have met someone who has racial prejudices against your child. Not always, sometimes. And now, and that was the conflict of the child and the teacher, but that is also partly the conflict of the parent and the teacher. Parents, we have a problem, especially now if you're African and you're educated, and you go to your child's kindergarten or you go to your child's school and they're talking to you like you've never been to school. First of all, they start speaking to you in broken German and you're like, why are you speaking to me like that? Can you please speak normally? And they ask you everything, and they're asking you, have you understood? Have you understood? And we start thinking, what are these people thinking about us? Why are they think we don't know? Or like other people will be told something and you may not be invited to know certain things. Or when you realize someone might be picking up on your child, or you'll be called because of your child's behavior, and you feel that they're talking to you from a point of they're higher than you are, that sometimes happen, not because they want to, but because it's just, I don't know, the human brain, the way it's wired. I don't know where they got this white privilege of we are better than you are, and it's your space. I always remind people it's your space to correct them. It doesn't always happen, but it mostly happens. It's our space to correct them. It's our space to talk to them if we are of the opinion something is not right with the way they're treating our children. They're picking on our children. They're not marking things correctly. We get information late, etc. It's our right to look for them and look for help at all levels. And now, generally, is race involved? Not always. No teacher steps into a classroom and says, I'll be racist toward child XYZ. Sometimes they ask racist questions out of ignorance. When you look at the school textbooks that we used to teach, I remember when I started teaching at the primary school about 9 years ago, and the book I had to teach was still having war in some country in Africa, which had not had war for the last 10 years. And everyone before me had been teaching using that, and it was okay. And I went and told my school head, I'm sorry, I'm not using this. Can you please get me a new book? And she was like, we have to use it. And I just tore out the pages and I told her, no, this is not true. So you can Google. If it's true, I'll replace the book. But if it's not true, I'm tearing those pages out of every book. No child should be reading this. And the books that we're using, because we never buy school books every year, we buy them for the school like every 5 to 6 years. And the book publishers also do not publish books every year. They publish every 3 to 4 years. It takes a while before they've caught up with the new things. And sometimes even the latest books are also not yet the latest informed about how our countries are, where we come from, and stuff like that. So there's always this subtle race issue of children looking at books that show the Black child as the poor child, as the hungry child, as coming from the war-torn country, coming from the country that has drought. And that's just not race. If you live in a big city like Berlin, just look at the bus stops, the public bus stops, or the walls where they're advertising for hunger in Kenya. I think there was something, what do you call them? I've forgotten what they're called, but one of these international NGOs was just had a campaign a few weeks ago that every 10 seconds, there's a person dying in Kenya. And I had a friend who just come from Kenya, and she's Zambian. She was like, Rachel, I should have been dead because I was in Kenya for 1 week and I didn't die. So when you see things like that, educate the public about you, educate the teachers, offer to go to school and offer Kenya Day. You can offer an Africa Day with a few other African parents, but you can offer a Kenyan Day. Like when I teach, the first thing when I get into a class and kids always ask, who are you? Or I introduce myself. Or when I get my university mentee students, one of the first things I do is to show them my background in Kenya. I show them the village and tell them these are the people you call poor, but that's my grandmother's big compound, which nobody in Germany can afford. And this is now our life in the town where I grew up, and it's very different, and it's actually more privileged than the life you're having here. So it's we to get off this curtain they have on their faces about race, because no one else will do it. But really, there's some subtle race issues that are involved in school, and it's upon us to know how to solve them. So I think we get to the discussion bit. I've taken more than your time. Yeah, I've talked more than the 30 minutes I was given. So
just on a minute.
Questions.
Wow. Whew. That was so emotional.
Really?
Thank you so much. Please give Rachel a clap. Just unmute yourselves and just give her a clap. I think she deserves a clap.
Clap, clap.
Clap, clap. Yes. That's all I can say. I think this is a talk. Let me first say good night. Go and sleep now. Go and sleep now. Yes, we are told to love our children.
Yeah, please do.
Wow, that was mind blowing. I think we need
session short.
No, we will break it.
Njoki gave me 30 minutes. I've talked for 1 hour.
We'll break it into pieces. That's what we had agreed, Rachel.
Yeah,
so at least it's
true.
effectful. And wow. So it's up to us to join the system. Let me stop the recording and then we can go and Q&A session. Thank you so much, Rachel, once more. And let me just stop and then we can now go and ask our questions.